500 watching points. Watching point number 132. Watch, lest you conceive of the power of God as acting in your behalf to care for you and protect you only when you are consciously thinking right. Your demonstration is to establish the fact that your light is shining away the darkness of fear, whether your conscious thought seems scientific or, for the moment, depressed. You must know that demonstration still goes on, and that the phase of mortal mind that is trying to call itself you has no power to interfere with the eternal operation and tender care of infinite love. You must outgrow the conception of God which says that if you have a clear and scientific ability to argue the truth, His power is at hand, whereas His power is withdrawn when your scientific arguments cease. God never withdraws Himself. Mortals merely lose sight of Him. In the parable of the unjust judge, Jesus set forth mortal minds' more or less finite conception of God, who helps man only when he importunes. Christian Science explains God as infinite love, forever caring for man, whether he knows it or not. But when through false belief man loses sight of this fact, it requires importunity with his own demonstrating sense in order to regain his consciousness of it, so that to him it is active and operating. Mrs. Eddy said to Calvin Fry, "Make supplication to God daily, that you may be delivered from all beliefs of sin or sickness, and after doing this, then turn to and demand of yourself to realize their unreality and recognize your power over the temptation to yield to any such an illusion." It is the preponderance of good or evil in man's thinking that determines what his manifestation will be. His consciousness of his relation to God must be renewed daily. Why? Because he is dealing with a leaky vessel. The claim is that whatever one puts into this so-called human mind leaks out, whether it be truth or error. So one must seek to think right each day in order to keep the spiritual level of his thought at the high point that will enable infinite love to flow into him and through him. We should work, watch, and pray, study and argue truth, not because we fancy that otherwise God will withdraw Himself and that we will cease to receive His care and protection, but because we see the importance of keeping the normal level of thought at that high point where there will be no loss of the inflow of that which we need for wisdom and life. Because of this claim of a leaky vessel, we must watch daily to keep our sense of truth active and alert. Mrs. Eddy sought to keep her students on their toes spiritually by instilling them with the fear of the Lord and the seriousness of the situation if they permitted what they knew of truth to leak away. If you saw a housewife ironing and her movements became slower and slower, you might frighten her into activity by declaring that if she was not careful, the iron would scorch the dress if it passed over it too slowly. When Mrs. Eddy found her students slowing up mentally, she held up the fear of the Lord to stimulate them. At times, she used the machinations of Richard Kennedy and Josephine Woodbury to goad them on, as much as to say, "What will become of the cause if these emissaries of the devil are permitted to function unchecked?" As time went on, the bugaboo she held up became more impersonal, but its purpose was the same, namely, to stimulate the students to a daily effort. Today, we must keep ourselves aroused to a daily spiritual effort, not because we believe that God will withdraw himself if we do not, but because we fear that our consciousness of him may leak away, or that inactivity may permit the clouds of animal magnetism to veil our vision of him, as mist gathers at night when the air is motionless.